Hello and welcome to Sweet Rides. Today I managed to get my hands on this, the Aprilia Tuono V4. But today we're going to be asking, is this better than a factory? So in the past, the only difference really between the standard V4 and the factory was that the factory got a fancy paint job and got some electronic Öhlins suspension. But this year, all of that's changed. So basically, there's a lot more differences between the two models now. This isn't simply the model you choose because you can't afford the factory. Aprilia have decided to kind of differentiate between the two models a little bit more. So what's different with this one? So starting off, we've got a much bigger screen here, giving your rider a little bit more protection. The standard factory screen is quite low. It's called a naked bike. It has got a small fairing on it. But with this one, you've got a wider fairing, bigger screen, keeps you out of the wind, keeps you out of the elements. Suspension on this one is Sachs suspension, not the Öhlins, and we'll talk about the quality of that a little bit later. One of the big differences is the handlebars. You've got a taller riser on there, lifts the handlebars up, come back a little bit more towards the rider, just makes it a little bit more comfortable. Other differences, seat is a bit more comfortable than the standard factory. You've got quite a decent pillion perch here. You've got the grab rails on the back, so you can actually take a pillion on this one. If you've seen the factory, you know what I'm talking about. The passenger footrests are much lower than on the factory bike. And when you sit on here, it's actually quite a comfortable pillion position if you are carrying a passenger. I'll also put some pictures up. There are factory luggage systems available as well, which kind of makes the bike good for short tours. So realistically, what Aprilia have tried to do is they've tried to make this a more comfortable, more everyday type bike than the factory. Okay, so hopefully you're going to enjoy today's video. If you do enjoy it, please like and subscribe, and this just helps me to provide you with more content. Okay, so let's take this thing for a ride. So the Tuono has a 1077cc V4 engine that creates 175 horsepower and 121 newton meters of torque. And I can honestly say this is one of, if not the best motorcycle engines I've ever had the pleasure of using. This engine has power everywhere. It's an engine that likes to be pushed, and that's where you'll probably get the best from it. And definitely have the most fun. But on slower roads, in and around town, it's easily controllable, doesn't feel too much of a handful, and it's about as friendly as 175 horsepower gets. But as soon as the road opens up, you can wind on that throttle, knowing that when needed, the bike has more than enough performance for the road, and possibly even for the track. The electronics provide 6 riding modes, 3 predetermined and 3 user-defined, that can be set up to suit your specific riding style. The quick shifter and the gear change is really slick. The engine barking up through the gears, sounding just like a MotoGP bike. Blipper works seamlessly on the down changes. Combined with the glorious sound of the V4, it resonates and makes for a wonderful soundtrack, but also helps you to control the bike in a precise manner. The engine on this bike dominates the whole experience, but in the best way possible. I honestly can't think of another engine that works so well and sounds so good, especially with the standard exhaust. There's definitely no need to change it, unless you're actually looking to save some weight. This is an incredibly well balanced bike with great handling. Suspension is from Sachs. It's not the fancy electronic Öhlins you'll find on the factory, but for 95% of riders, it's more than up to the job, providing a plush, supportive ride. It's well suited to our British roads. I'm quite experienced with suspension, and it only took me a few little tweaks to get it feeling just how I like it. I've pushed the bike pretty hard on the road, and it coped with all surfaces brilliantly. If you do decide to take it on track, there's plenty of adjustment, and just a few extra clicks should be more than enough for some more extreme riding. Yes, the electronic suspension would be easier, but it would also be a lot more expensive.
Although I think if Aprilia are going to continue down this route, they should maybe offer it as an option on both machines. Out on the road, the bike goes exactly where you want it to, hitting apexes with race bike-like accuracy, which is not surprising considering it uses the same chassis as the RS V4 Superbike. Out the box, the setup is near perfect for UK roads and would only need adjusting if you were much lighter or heavier than the average UK rider, whatever that is. Anyway, I'm about 14 stone and it felt good to me. The brakes on this bike are Brembo M50s, and while not the latest Brembo items, they perform brilliantly on this bike. They're radially mounted and the brake pressure is provided by the radial master cylinder. If you can't stop quick enough with these, you're definitely going too fast. So, one of the main reasons for getting this bike over the factory is the comfort. I've previously owned a 2017 factory, and while this is a similar riding position, just a few adjustments they've made to the riding triangle have really helped. Combined with the additional wind protection, it's really made this bike a much more interesting proposition. I wouldn't go as far to say that it can be classified as a tourer, but it's certainly capable of travelling longer distances in a bit more comfort and will probably suit more riders than the factory, especially if you fit the luggage options. I didn't really notice any issues with the seat, which in my book is a good thing. Bad seat is normally the first thing I notice. I've had this bike a few days now and I've covered hundreds of miles, and I can honestly say the seat hasn't caused me any issues at all. Whilst your legs are still pretty tucked up, same as the factory, because you're sitting slightly more upright, it feels very different. Weirdly, it feels like the pegs are now set lower, but they're not. As with most modern bikes with this kind of power, the Aprilia comes with a full suite of electronics that make the bike safer and more enjoyable to ride. The electronics are accessible through the all-new TFT screen, which is very clear and easy to read. Controlling the electronics is quite easy through the use of the directional control button on the left-hand switchgear. The bike has a 6-axis IMU, which helps to control the APRC suite, which is Aprilia Performance Ride Control, and that has all your engine mapping. Engine brake management, traction control, wheelie control, launch control, cruise control, my favourite, and even a pit limiter for those of you that want to take it on track. What I really like about the Aprilia electronics is that you don't notice them working. They complement your riding and make you feel like a riding god, but it never actually feels like the bike is intervening or helping you. Okay, we've been out here for quite a while now. Let's head back and have a closer look at the bike.
Okay, so let's talk about style and design. Personally, I like the way Aprilia have updated this bike. It's now got the familiar face that you see on the 660 range of bikes, and it's clearly still a Tuono, but they've updated it nicely. It looks more modern, looks more tech, and I think it's a lovely looking bike, I really do. The previous model Tuono was starting to look a little bit dated, and that's not surprising. That model had been out for nearly 10 years without any major changes. So this one's looking really good. Now, not everyone's going to like the colour options. Aprilia do make some strange choices sometimes. But if you go for the factory, you're going to get the racier looking paint jobs. If you go for the standard V4, you tend to get the plainer colours, which I personally prefer. Okay, so I'll put some colours up on the screen for you. This one is actually a 2022 model, I think, which is the Glacier White. It's not a colour for this year, but there are still lots of white ones available in the dealerships. This year's colours are Torque Red, and also we've got Tarmac Grey, which is kind of a silver grey colour. Okay, so let's talk about desirability. I've got to admit, desirability with Aprilia is a strange one. To me, this is one of the best bikes, if not the best bike, you can buy in the UK today. It handles amazingly, it's got a fantastic engine, probably the best engine on the market. This should be the best-selling bike in the UK, but it's not, and I really don't understand why. So part of the issue has been in the past, I think Aprilia have perhaps struggled to maintain their dealerships, and I know there's been a few issues apparently with parts supply in the past. Now, as I've mentioned on my previous videos, I had a 2017 factory Aprilia. It was really reliable. I had no issues with it. I had no problems with servicing. I had no problems with parts. So in my experience, I've not had those dealership problems. You may live in a part of the country or a part of the world where those are real issues. So I think that situation, perhaps in the past for Aprilia, has caused issues, has made the bikes less desirable, and has actually caused the company to discount the bikes quite heavily. And they really don't need to. I think this then impacts on the second-hand market, causes the value of the second-hand models to drop, and it's just kind of a never-ending cycle. But pound for pound, honestly, I don't think you can get a better bike than this. So cost. Current retail price of this bike in the UK is £15,500. Aprilia UK are currently offering an additional discount, £750, taking the bikes down to £14,750. And I've seen many dealers discounted prices even lower than that. Currently, Via Moto in Sheffield are selling this model in a range of colours at £13,495. Now, on a monthly PCP with a £500 deposit, that's only £149 a month. That's an absolute bargain. Now, when you consider the Ducati Street Fighter, which is another favourite of mine, costs over £21,000. If you can pick one of these up for £13,495, honestly, it's an absolute no-brainer. So before we reach our conclusion, what didn't I like about the bike? This isn't a complaint from me. This is a complaint that I've seen on some of the other videos for the Tuono V4, some of the other YouTubers. And I really think it depends on the size of your feet and the type of boots you're wearing. But a lot of people have complained about where the supports for the rear footrests come. Now for me, I don't wear a race boot. I wear these sort of comfortable Daytonas. And I ride with the balls of my feet on the footrest. And when I ride there, you can see my heel just misses the rear footrest there. It doesn't cause me any issues at all. Now I'm a size 9, but I do understand if you've got bigger feet, it could be an issue. Obviously they've done this to make the ride more comfortable for your passenger. And ultimately, the Tuono is based on the RS-V4 race bike. For me, it doesn't cause an issue. Now I had a 2017 Tuono factory, and the cruise control, the buttons on that, the switch gear were very, very fiddly. With this one, it's a little bit easier, but the switch to turn the cruise control on is kind of sat beneath where your wing mirror is. So you almost kind of have to wedge your finger in between the wing mirror to push it on to activate it. And then it sits right on top of the switch gear, and you've really got to stretch your thumb kind of. It's just a little bit awkward to use. Now, if you watch the channel, you know I own a Harley-Davidson ST Road Glide. You know I also own KTM 1290 Super Duke. Now, both those bikes have got really simple cruise control systems. It's a one-button system. They're really simple to use. The updates generally that they've done on the bike are fantastic. However, just a few tiny bits and pieces, like the cruise control, for me, just lets it down. But if you watch the channel, you know I'm a bit obsessed with cruise control. One of the other things with it is when you are pushing up, increasing the speed, literally as you push the button, there's a bit of a jerk as it's almost like it instantly gives it the extra acceleration, the gas. On the other bikes that I own, it just does it a little bit more progressively. It's a minor issue, it does work, it's just not working perhaps how I would like it. Okay, so conclusion. As I'm sure you're already aware, the Aprilia V4 gets a big thumbs up from me. It's an amazing machine, absolutely incredible. But is it better than the factory? Well, I think that depends on your riding and your circumstances. For me, personally, yes, this is a better bike. It's slightly more comfortable to ride. I've got the option to take passengers, luggage. It just makes a lot more sense. So the combination of the riding position, the practicality, the fact that the standard suspension is really, really good. Do I need to spend another £3,000 on a factory? No, I don't. I know there's going to be those of you out there that will be drawn to the fancy paint. You'll like the fact that you've got the Öhlins suspension on there. Maybe if you do track days, stuff like that, you might find that suspension an advantage for you. But I've done some pretty hard road riding with this, and it hasn't let me down at all. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. As I said earlier, please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on Sweet Rides.